For years, Stephen A. Smith has had plenty to say about the Knicks and Jalen Brunson. But now, Brunson appears to have fired back. According to Stephen A. himself, the Knicks star recently sent him a message. That quickly got the basketball world talking. Here's what happened. Knicks stars Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns weren't quick to forget how Stephen A. Smith initially counted them out in their second-round series against the Boston Celtics. And after New York's series-clinching win in Game 6, Smith relayed the encounters publicly. Brunson didn't shout. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't go on First Take and demand airtime. He walked up to one of the loudest voices in sports media and gave him 5 words. "I have nothing to say to you," Brunson told him. And Karl-Anthony Towns piled on right after, telling Smith, "You picked the wrong team." That's it. No speech, no chest thumping, just 2 men who remembered. And that's what makes it so devastating. Because Smith didn't just pick the Celtics to win. He'd been on record about Brunson long before that series even started. Now, the reason this moment cuts so deep, the reason it spread the way it did, is that it's not just about a playoff series. It's about a years-long verdict that Stephen A. Smith handed down, with maximum volume and minimum hesitation, that Jalen Brunson was simply not built for what New York needed. On camera, Smith had raged. "The Knicks are acting like he's KD. Jalen Brunson isn't the answer. You creating this cap space to get Jalen Brunson?" Said after the 2022 NBA draft. "Jalen Brunson isn't the answer. Are you creating this cap space to get Jalen Brunson? Is he KD? Is he Kawhi Leonard? Jalen Brunson's a damn good player. I'd be happy to have him. But all of this stuff you're going to do because you're selling New York on Jalen Brunson." Smith, a man who calls himself a Knicks fan, fired up, incredulous, talking about the guy who is now in the NBA Finals. And when the Knicks got there, when they actually reached the finals, for the first time since 1999, those old clips came flooding back onto the internet like a tidal wave. Fans dug up every timestamp, every quote, every red-faced rant, and they hit play over and over again. The New York Knicks are in the 2026 NBA Finals, and in Game 1 led by Brunson, they used a late surge to upset the San Antonio Spurs, 105-95, for their 12th consecutive win in the playoffs. That winning run eventually hit 13 straight, a streak only the 2016-17 Golden State Warriors, who won 15 in a row, have surpassed in postseason history. The same man Smith said wasn't the answer. The same man Smith questioned when New York mortgaged assets to bring him in. That man is now the face of the Knicks' first finals run in over 2 decades, being called a potential all-time great, and he walked past Stephen A. Smith with 5 words that needed no amplification. That's the clapback right there. What Smith had scrutinized was the manner in which New York approached the signing, and the fact that they were willing to bet their future on a relatively lesser-known player at the time. But betting that future on Brunson is exactly what the Knicks did, and right now, it looks like the best bet this franchise has made in half a century. Brunson has been the driving force of the Knicks' playoff push, producing 27 points and 6 assists per game across 15 postseason appearances, maintaining a 476 field goal percentage while carrying a heavy offensive load. Now let's go back to where this all started, because to understand just how far this moment lands, you have to understand where Brunson came from, and why Stephen A. Smith's original take felt so ironclad at the time. The summer of 2022, the Knicks are desperate. They haven't sniffed a title in half a century. The fan base is restless. The roster is a patchwork. And Madison Square Garden is a building full of history that hasn't meant anything in decades. New York needed a star, or at the very least, the promise of one. What they went out and got was a 6'1" guard from Villanova, who'd spent his best years living in Luka Doncic's shadow. In Smith's defense, Brunson was far from a proven commodity at the time. He was breaking out as a big-time playoff performer for the Dallas Mavericks, but leading another team as the first option, especially a big-market franchise like the Knicks, was another story entirely. In 2022, the guard signed a 4-year, $104 million contract, and at the time, many were skeptical about it, as he had averaged 16 3-points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. During the 2021-22 season with Dallas, these were the numbers of a very good second option, a guy who thrives when the defense is occupied elsewhere, a guy who looks great next to a generational playmaker. And now New York was going to hand him the keys to one of the most pressure-filled franchises in professional sports. The reaction was sharp, even from within the Knicks fan base. Smith highlighted how the Knicks hired Rick Brunson, Jalen's father, as an assistant coach to lure him over, referring to the tactic as an NCAA plot. Think about that framing for a second. Smith wasn't just criticizing the player. He was attacking the process. He was saying the entire operation, the cap maneuvers, the draft pick trades, the hiring of a family member, all of it built around a guy who didn't deserve the scale of the bet. It wasn't just doubt, it was full institutional indictment of the Knicks' decision-making. The Knicks had traded their number 11 pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder for multiple future first-round picks and entered a 3-team deal to offload a contract. And New York didn't draft any player with their lottery pick, which baffled many supporters, including Smith. And it wasn't just Smith. Nick Wright said it. Colin Cowherd said it. Brian Windhorst said it. The whole analyst class looked at Jalen Brunson and said, he's a really good player, but he's not that guy. Not in New York, not on a team that needs a savior. Then there was Becky Hammon. She'd put it bluntly years earlier. He's too small. If your best player is small, you're not winning. The size conversation had been following Brunson like a shadow his entire career. 6'1". Not elite athleticism, no freak physical gifts, just craft intelligence and a relentless desire to get buckets in traffic that most guards his size have no business getting into. But if you'd been watching Brunson his whole life, none of this was shocking. He was the reason Stevenson secured an Illinois Class 4A championship in 2015. The reason Villanova won 2 NCAA titles in 3 years between 2016 and 2018. And a central reason that the Mavericks made the Western Conference Finals in his first year as a starter. The pattern had been there forever. Brunson arrives. People doubt. Brunson wins. The receipts pile up, repeat. He hit the ground running immediately after joining the Knicks, helping New York end the 2022-23 season with a 47-35 record and make it past the first round of the playoffs. That season, Brunson averaged 24 points, 3-5 rebounds, and 6-2 assists per game. Not bad for someone who isn't the answer. But Smith and others weren't fully convinced yet. One good season in New York doesn't prove the point. Deep playoff runs do. Championships do. And Brunson wasn't there yet. But the foundation was being poured quietly, deliberately. And Brunson, who has never been the type to call a press conference to address his critics, was letting every game do the talking he refused to do himself. That would become a recurring theme. The silence, the production, the 5-word conversation with Stephen A. Smith. It starts with understanding just how loud the doubters were. Because the louder they were, the more powerful the eventual shutdown became. Here's the thing about Stephen A. Smith that makes this entire saga so uniquely maddening and so entertaining. He's not a neutral analyst. He is a die-hard New York Knicks fan. This isn't a rival tearing down the franchise. This is a man who grew up loving this team, calling himself a true believer, and still standing in front of a camera screaming that the guy his team just signed to be the franchise cornerstone was not up to the job. That's what gives the 2022 rant its sting. It wasn't ESPN bringing in an outside critic. It was the most famous Knicks fan on TV, waving a white flag at his own team's biggest move in years. For the most part, Smith never criticized Brunson as a player in those 2022 clips, showing nothing but love for his ability and talent. What he did scrutinize was the manner in which New York approached the signing, and the fact that they were willing to bet their future on a relatively lesser-known player at the time. But context doesn't soften the blow when you're the Knicks fan base, and the guy going viral is your own guy, shrieking that Jalen Brunson isn't KD. That's the clip. That's what people replay, not the nuance buried 2 sentences later. And Smith leaned into the bombast. He always does. That's the product. Big voice, big takes, immediate reactions that are designed to ignite rather than illuminate. And for a brief window in 2022, it worked. Because honestly, most of the basketball world agreed with him. Brunson wasn't a superstar. He was a really, really good player being handed a really, really large contract in the biggest market in sports. The doubt was rational. But then the Knicks kept winning, and Smith kept pivoting, and his pivots became as spectacular as his original criticisms. During an episode of First Take, as the Knicks powered through the 2025 playoffs, Smith named Brunson the best player in the postseason, saying Brunson had clearly earned that distinction over Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, pointing out that he had the highest scoring average of any player over the last 3 postseasons, the same player he questioned as a franchise cornerstone. Now, the best player in the playoffs. And once the Knicks reached the finals, Smith went even further, stating, If Jalen Brunson brings you a title for the first time in over 3 decades, I'm looking at Walt Clyde Frazier. I know he's that dude, but he's got 4 dudes who were on the 75th NBA anniversary team. That's who he was playing with. Who's Brunson playing with? If he delivers the chip, it is under far more adverse conditions. He definitely goes on top of the list. From he's not the answer to he's the greatest Knick of all time in 4 years. On Sirius XM NBA radio, Smith stated directly, "I personally believe that if he wins the championship for the New York Knicks this year, I believe he will be the greatest Knick of all time." Now, to be clear, Smith isn't the only one making this argument. Kendrick Perkins went on air and said, with the story behind him, if he leads this Knick team to win the NBA championship, the greatest Knick ever, hands down. Even Lonzo Ball took to social media to declare that Brunson is simply the best Knick to ever do it. But none of those people had previously stood in front of a camera and screamed into the void about how wrong the Knicks were to build around this guy. Smith had. Which is why his transformation hits differently. It's not just praise, it's atonement in real time, broadcast to millions. And Brunson, he knows, which is why those 5 words, delivered calmly, directly, with zero fanfare, landed with the weight of everything that came before them. To fully appreciate the clapback, you need to feel the weight of what Brunson actually went out and did, because those 5 words only carry that much meaning if the performance on the court earned them. And the performance? It's been staggering. The New York Knicks returned to the NBA Finals for the first time since the calendar flipped to 2000. Let that marinate, a franchise that plays in the most iconic arena in sports. A franchise with the largest media market in the country. 27 years without finals basketball. And the man who ended that drought is the same man Stephen A. Smith said wasn't the answer. The 2025 playoff run was the opening act. The Celtics were the consensus favorites going into that second-round series. The reigning NBA champions who had gone 4-0 against New York in the regular season. The Knicks, even getting pushed to 6 games by the Detroit Pistons in round 1, did little to ease concerns about their contender credentials. Smith picked Boston. So did basically everyone else with a functioning basketball brain. The Knicks swept them anyway, and that's when Brunson walked over to Smith on the court and gave him those 5 words. Then the finals came, and the pressure hit a whole different level. In Game 1 against the San Antonio Spurs, the Knicks trailed by as many as 14 points in the 3rd quarter, and were down by 1 with 2 minutes left. When Brunson hit a corner 3-pointer to give New York the lead for good, he scored 13 of his 30 points in the 4th quarter. Knicks coach Mike Brown said afterward, "Jalen, he was the MVP in the second half. He was huge for us. He did what MVP candidates are supposed to do. He carried us home. We put the ball in his hands and he got it done for us down the stretch." Then Game 2, same script. Brunson hit a go-ahead free throw with 9.5 seconds left after a Wembanyama turnover. And Wembanyama's final jumper missed, giving New York a 105-104 win and a 2-0 series lead. Wembanyama had 29 points and 9 rebounds but missed the game-winning jumper at the buzzer, as the Knicks held off a 14-point 4th quarter Spurs rally to take a commanding position in the series. Ticket prices on the secondary market for the worst seats at MSG were approaching $9, $0 apiece as Game 3 approached. Knicks fans evidently willing to pay at the top of the market just to be in the building as the team nears its first championship in 53 years. And then Game 3 happened. Victor Wembanyama had 32 points, 8 rebounds and 6 assists, carrying the Spurs to a 115-111 victory that cut the Knicks series lead to 2-1. Brunson scored 32 points and OG Anunoby had 28, but it wasn't enough. San Antonio got off the mat, the series breathed again. But the Knicks, who built this entire run on resilience and an almost robotic refusal to panic, weren't done. The roster Smith once questioned now has serious weapons. Karl Anthony Towns has provided 17 0-points and 10-7 rebounds per game in the playoffs, while OG Anunoby has added two-way consistency with 19 5-points on 48.4% shooting from 3. Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart fill the secondary playmaking and defensive roles, supporting a rotation built around switchability and perimeter control. This isn't a one-man show, but Brunson is the heartbeat of it, the closer. The one who gets the ball when the game is on the line and the whole arena holds its breath. Every time it's looked impossible, he's found a way. That's not luck. That's not a system. That's a man built for moments, proving exactly what the doubters said he could never be. Now we're here, in the middle of the NBA Finals, the Knicks leading the series 2-1, with the whole city of New York buzzing at a frequency it hasn't reached in over 2 decades. And the conversation has shifted, because when you're this close to a championship, it stops being about the present tense and starts being about history. Willis Reed walking out of the tunnel for Game 7 of the 1970 NBA Finals is the most replayed image in franchise history. Playing on a torn muscle in his thigh, he hit the first 2 jump shots of the night, sparked MSG, and gave the Knicks the emotional jolt they needed to finish off the Lakers. That game turned Reed into the face of toughness for every Knicks team that followed. Walt Frazier's Game 7 masterpiece in the 1970 Finals, 36 points, 19 assists, and 7 rebounds while hounding Jerry West, is still the greatest single-game performance in franchise history. That night locked in his reputation and gave the franchise its first title. These are the names. The legends Brunson is now being measured against by Smith, by Perkins, by Lonzo Ball, by everyone watching this run unfold. Frazier's ability to raise his level on the biggest stages is the template Brunson is chasing right now. And the debate is genuinely alive. Not everyone is convinced. Not all voices have been willing to pour into the legacy talk, with some analysts cautioning against disrespecting past greats for the sake of the present, noting that Brunson's story isn't over yet, regardless of what happens in these finals. But Smith has committed fully, loudly, in the way only Smith can commit to something, with volume that fills a room and conviction that sounds like it was always his position. Historically, Steph Curry, Isaiah Thomas, Chauncey Billups, and Gus Williams are the only guards listed at 6'3" or under to lead a team to an NBA championship. But Brunson, sitting on the verge of doing it in New York, is different from what any other point guard in the history of the league has done. The market, the drought, the scrutiny, the weight of a city that had watched generation after generation of Knicks teams fall short. Patrick Ewing, 11 All-Star selections, never a ring. The 1999 team that went on a miracle run from the 8th seed, only to get swept by San Antonio. And now here, Brunson, the guy Smith said was not the answer, 2 wins away. As of Game 2, Brunson was the strong favorite to win Finals MVP. The Knicks' leading scorer and their go-to creator in the clutch, having sunk the game-winning shot in Game 1 and the game-winning free throw in Game 2. But the physical challenge is real. Brunson shot just 34% from the field in the first 2 games, and the Spurs have been relentless in their assignment to make him work for everything. This isn't a coronation yet. Game 3 proved the series isn't over. Wembanyama, 22 years old, 7'4", and clearly capable of imposing his will when the game is calling for it, is not done. San Antonio is trying to make a first-of-its-kind comeback in finals history, and Wembanyama, with his array of skills, makes anything look possible. So the story is still being written. The clapback isn't complete until that trophy is in Brunson's hands. But here's the thing about that 5-word moment in the locker room. It was never really about that one conversation. It was about 4 years of noise, of constant interrogation, of media cycles that asked over and over again whether this man was enough. And a player who answered every single time. Not with words, but by doing the thing they said he couldn't do. Smith said Brunson wasn't the answer. Brunson has made a career of proving others wrong. And Smith has to be over the moon that the 29-year-old guard has made him eat his words, because it means the Knicks have become successful after being a laughingstock for so long. That's the full arc. A diehard fan who doubted too loudly, a player who doesn't engage with the noise, and a city that waited 53 years for this moment. The red-hot Knicks are 2 wins away from an NBA championship that the capital of the world has been waiting to see for generations. Whatever happens next in this series, whether Brunson lifts that trophy and cements his name above Frazier and Reed in franchise lore, or whether Wembanyama finds another gear and drags San Antonio back into contention, one thing is already settled. On a night in May 2025, after eliminating the defending champions, Jalen Brunson walked over to the loudest voice in basketball media. The man who questioned everything the Knicks built, looked him in the eye, and said 5 words. That was the clapback. Everything else is just a sequel.